Now, the question I'm going to be asking today is essentially, why did Stellaris fail in both the act of becoming something to watch on YouTube, which more affects me, and also as a game in single player. Now, this came up, I know it's a bit late now, but I was playing Stellaris with a friend of mine and another one, and we found that as fun as the early game was, once we entered the mid game, we didn't actually continue playing. There was just nothing to do. It was all just blobbing. And I think anyone that's played it will attest to this and understand what I mean, that there's a huge gap of content in the mid game, but also moving back to the way that it works with YouTube, there's no investment by the viewer. Essentially, if you go to EU4, you have, first of all, countries, so people have a personal investment that way, but also when you look into how the starts act, in Stellaris every start is the same. There is no difference. There is no personality to the starts. There's only, you have your science ship, you have your construction ship, you go around, you survey systems, you build systems, and you build on from there, which ends up being extremely similar. There's near to no difference in how you play certain nations, other than the way you decide. Even if you are fully pacifistic, it does not stop you from declaring wars, it does not stop you from conquesting. If you want to play militarily, there's no reason you can't decide that, no, I want to be doing this instead. So there is no direction, there's no actual... For example, if you were thinking about playing, say, Star Trek The Federation, you would never attack anyone. Unless there was a dispute with one of your allies or something like that. But you personally would never attack anyone, simply because, as the Federation in the Star Trek universe, war is very much frowned upon. There's no one that would support you in such a regard. Granted, someone will dig up an example of where it was the opposite, but in a general sense, the Federation of the Star Trek universe would never declare war. In Stellaris, you can roleplay as that Federation, but I mention it's roleplaying because even if you decided to attack someone, it was easily possible. You can just say, oh, declare war, and you're in it. There's no retribution for it other than that what you decided to have in during the beginning, which would have been your pacifistic doctrine. You have a bit weaker armies, but it really doesn't matter. Additionally, once you do get past the early game, which is essentially your first few special events, your first few encounters, things become mundane. After about the 20-minute mark of a game, I would never read the research projects anymore. I would look at the failure chance and decide if or not I would want to do it. Other than that, I ignored them. I didn't read them. There was just no reason to. This might be partially because of my lack of interest at the time, but at the same time, there isn't really much variety either. There's always those very few that will always come up again. You eventually know, oh, I will never click this ever again because there's only bad ways it could go, and essentially you don't have much investment in it anymore. Lastly, in terms of multiplayer, there's actually an issue which comes to pass that the same blobbing mechanic that happens in EU4, which is still relatively interesting because you have that separation sometimes of distance, or you still have the AI coalitions that may develop. The AI coalitions can develop in Stellaris, but there is no concept of distance. You can easily just decide to go around someone because, as in EU4, maybe the New World, there's a lot of uncolonized land and you can just walk right through it, or in this case, fly. And so there is no distance. You can launch a strike from across the galaxy on a different empire without much retribution. You can do almost anything you want. There is no boundaries, there is no path to follow. It's way too open. There's no, I would almost say there's no consequence. Now if we take, for example, Hearts of Iron 4, yes, it is better, but it has the same flaws. There's very little difference between nations. For example, if I played Ethiopia or if I played Liberia, you would still do more or less the same general idea. The only difference you'll have is playing between minors and majors, and after a while playing a minor, you'll eventually become a major anyway, simply because you'll grow in your economy and so on and so forth. And again, the early game is very similar to each other, so you'll have a very, very long time before you actually decide to enter any sort of war or any sort of investment on your part. Something like CK2, where every single game is different, because firstly you have different starting positions, you have different power structures, you have different religions, and how, because the religions in CK2 are done very well compared to your ethics in this game, where it is actually extremely difficult to attack certain religions. As the same religion, for example, as a Christian, you need a claim. There's no other way you can do it. As a pagan, which is in itself a more warlike religion, you can easily attack people, but you have to remember that you are quite weak, and so on and so forth. So it's very much interesting in that regard. U4, less with the religions, more with the power structures. The alliances are big, the terrain matters. There's no such thing as terrain in Stellaris, and there's very little, as far as I've seen, as spying. You cannot pre-look into what your enemy empire has in terms of military force, other than saying, oh, they're equivalent. I'm like, great, but do they have lasers? Do they have kinetic weapons? What do they use? And you can only do it very difficult. It's not very transparent, and so most people don't bother and just gamble if they can get it right. So again, there's that. There's no engagement from that side. You have very little differing starting positions. Something Hearts of Iron 4 also has. There's little change in playing different types of empires other than how you decide to play. As I said again, Hearts of Iron is similar in this regard. EU4 and CK2 do devolve into that late game, but they have a long period of struggle before it. In comparison, the other two don't. Now, I'm not saying Stellaris is a bad game, but it is not very well paced. Also, again, variety. You can play maybe 1 or 2 games before you've pretty much seen everything. The late game is so far out of reach oftentimes that many people don't even decide to play towards it. I've played now almost 10 games maybe, and most of them not even completed, simply because I get bored by the incessant freeway expansion ways you can conquer, colonize, or just sit there and mine your resources into oblivion, but it doesn't appeal to me. Now, once more, in regards to YouTube watching, I've seen, even by other YouTubers, the Stellaris videos are very much unpopular in comparison to the Hearts of Iron 4, CK2, so on and so forth. And again, I feel like, firstly, there's no personal investment. There is no countries you can fight for. And oftentimes, if you play, for example, France, you'll have a lot of French people watching and so forth. So firstly, yes, there's no personal investment. And secondly, there's no way you can imply that a campaign will be a challenge. For example, if I would say, I'm going to play Albania in EU4, people know that's a challenge. People know that Albania is tiny, it's surrounded by majors, and there's problems. If I say, oh, I'll play this pacifist empire with slavery for some reason, people are like, well, that's weird, but there's no, that's it. You can only look at that in regards to the traits, and then you have to trust that I actually decide to play that way, which I may not. Again, you'll have that long period of build-up at first, a few wars maybe, then the end game. It's the same. Every time it is the same. And it's essentially just very bland. There's no difference. I feel that's the main issue with the Stellaris campaigns. When you watch them on YouTube, there's just no difference. And after watching one, you might as well have watched 20, because they'll all be the same. There's always going to be that same step by step. I don't say that I can do it better. However, I can identify the problems, and perhaps even if the request comes, I might be able to put some answers in as to how to fix this problem. However, at the moment, it's more of a finding the cancer and then cutting it out later. Thanks all for watching. This This was a little rant, simply because, you know, occasionally we have to have those. I'll be seeing you all next time, hopefully in the next video. Hopefully I can get back into one of the Paradox games. I've been a bit of a lull lately. My two mess-ups, well, my one mess-up in Tibet and my current apathy towards Holstein are not helping in that regard. CK2 will continue for a while longer, although if the numbers dwindle in terms of viewers, I might just end it. I do have quite a big backlog for it, and I think I'll let that run out, and then I rage quit eventually, due to terrible game mechanics, as per usual. And since it's an Iron Man campaign, there's not really much I can do about it. So anyway, thanks all for watching, hope you enjoyed this little rant of mine, and I'll see you all next time.